I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. We moved there when I was 6, and it was a time when winters were heavy, heavy snow. So there was a lot of indoor time, and my favorite thing in the world was watching the nature shows on TV. I loved those shows. So that's where I first really became interested in natural resources, was learning mostly about wildlife, but also about forestry. And of course, in the summer, we had these wonderful long days, and the house I grew up on had a little corner of the property that was just natural vegetation, and I spent hours and hours and hours out there. So I think that's where I first became interested in the outdoors. And then at some point in high school, I took that test where they match your personality to jobs. And I remember that it came out as natural resources and forestry was something that I would be good at. Now at that point, I had not at any time thought that that was something I was going to do. I was perfectly content in having my natural resources world be television, PBS. But then I thought, well, hey, you know what? Maybe this is a good match for me. At the time, though, I was also interested in education. So I had in the back of my mind, education is something I'm interested in, forestry. So when I was starting to look for colleges, you know, this was back in the days when you just got random catalogs that showed up at your house and you flipped through the random catalogs, and I narrowed it down to Colorado State University for natural resources and something, and I think the other one was the University of Vermont. My mom pointed out that an airplane flight from Vermont to Alaska would be very, very long, and perhaps I wanted to stay closer to the West Coast, so I ended up at Colorado State. And that's where I decided to pursue wildlife biology, which was wonderful and so interesting, and I loved it. Figured out pretty fast that employment-wise, I would be doing the temporary job for potentially years, short-term temp, in order to get a full-time job. And I thought, you know, I think maybe I'd like to look at forestry. So I went on and got a master's degree in forestry at Oregon State University with an emphasis on education. While I was at Colorado State, I also got my teaching license. So now I had the teaching license, the education side, I had natural resources, and I decided to put them together with this educator emphasis at Oregon State in forestry. So let's go back to when I was at Colorado State, and here I am getting my wildlife degree, and I had an interest in education, and I ended up having a wonderful mentor by the name of Gene Decker. Gene would joke that he got his PhD in combat conservation. His specialty was public relations and marketing, and he worked for, I think it was the Colorado Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm sure that's not the correct name, but whatever it was at the time. And he would try to bring together these very diverse, hostile groups to come up with reasonable approaches to wildlife management. And he did public relations classes, and that's where I first learned that I was a very strong public speaker and had a real knack for education. And he's the one who told me, if you really want to do natural resources education, you have to get your teaching license, because it's important to understand what classroom teachers are going through and what the vocabulary of schools and the systems of schools to understand how to be a natural resources educator. So I did. I got my teaching license in, it was called Biology and Natural Resources, and I was certified or licensed, whatever it was at the time, for 7 through 12. But I also learned there that as much as I love and respect classroom teachers, I was not interested in being in a classroom for the rest of my career. I was really interested in being outdoors, and that's why I made the decision to go and pursue a master's degree in forestry education with an education emphasis, so that I could really pull natural resources and education together. So I went to Oregon State University and studied under Ed Jensen, who is a wonderful, wonderful professor, and was able to expand my understanding of forestry, expand my understanding of interpretation and natural resources education and adult education. And when I graduated, I then fled the country to the Peace Corps. That's what I'd always wanted to do the Peace Corps, because that's where my parents met. So I went to Madagascar, where I was in charge of an interpretive center, or I was supposed to be helping at an interpretive center. The person who was in charge, who was a host country national, was not super excited to have foreigners helping. So I did a whole bunch of things. I built a road and 2 bridges and a couple of schools, and I did a lot of community development. But I think it was there that I really learned to appreciate that you can't protect forests by excluding people and their needs. That people need the forest more than just spiritually, more than just in terms of emotional health. They need it physically. They need the water, they need the wood, they need the animals. And the efforts that I was aware of in Madagascar of trying to protect a forest by excluding people failed. You have to have the community on board with what you're doing in your forest management if it's going to be successful. So those were lessons that when I came back to the United States, I really had in the back of my mind that you have to talk about forests and promote forest stewardship from a position of helping communities and individuals as well. All right, so when I came back from the Peace Corps, my first job was with OSU Extension. I was putting together a slideshow about natural resources management, and that was really fun and a great way to reconnect with my professors from Oregon State University. And I discovered not only do I like making slideshows, I'm extremely good at drawing in PowerPoint, which is a skill that has come in handy many times over the years. And then I took a job with the Partnership for the Umpqua Rivers, writing watershed assessments and action plans. Now, writing watershed assessments and action plans is really not that interesting of a job. They're really just really long, boring documents about fish habitat and water quality. But you also do public meetings with the community that you're working on to get their feedback, and those were great. I really enjoyed that. So that side of educating the public about what we were learning and what we were doing and what we were finding, and then getting information from them about their own watershed, was a really great learning experience, and has served me all these years because I have all this tidbit of information in the back of my head about geology and water quality and soil science and trends in climate and all of this stuff that has been handy ever since. So worked there for a long time until our family relocated to Lane County, and I volunteered with Forest Today and Forever, which is the group I work for now, doing forestry education, and it has been just the most wonderful job because I am now bringing together my education background and my forestry and wildlife background in a really meaningful way. And we just finished redoing our primary curriculum called Forest Field Days, and it was just a fantastic experience going through that curriculum, updating the information, using my own knowledge of forestry and wildlife to make it more relevant to kids, more interesting to kids, as well as promoting forestry, forest management, and industrial forestry as a career and as an asset to our community. One of the changes that I felt was really important to make in the curriculum was originally they didn't have these people who were harvesting timber, they weren't paying any taxes. No, really, they paid inheritance tax, but they never paid any more taxes. And I thought, no, you're in forestry, if you're cutting down trees, you are paying taxes. So we included in the curriculum the forest products harvest tax. We included that the money they make, they have to pay taxes on, to show that forestry is contributing financially to our communities. So it has been wonderful to have that job, and to have this job, and I have really enjoyed being in a position where education and forestry and wildlife are coming together in a meaningful way that benefits kids. Hi, Callie. Doesn't benefit you though, huh? No. Callie sometimes comes with me to the field, and she really loves that. So what does it mean to be a woman who knows the woods? Well, I guess I think of it more as, what does it mean to be an educator who knows the woods? For me, I really enjoy doing things like trying to figure out, how do I make a concept that's complicated not only accessible to kids, but really fun for kids? So one of the things that I came up with is, this is one of my favorite props. So this is my seedling. Can you guess what this was made out of? Probably not. This started out as a dryer brush, which I found at Cascade Hardware in Cresswell. And when I saw it, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a seedling in the making. So with some yarn and a little bit of work with spray paint, I created this seedling. I'm thinking about putting googly's eyes on it, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But having this tool to show kids, okay, so this is the size of a Douglas fir seedling when you put it in the ground. How long do you think it takes for this Douglas fir seedling that's only this high to get to be, if we were in a Douglas fir forest, this giant tree? You know, this kind of hands-on, very demonstrative prop, things like this, I really think makes a difference. And so what I really enjoy about working in the woods is helping kids see the bigger picture, you know, looking around at all these trees and recognizing these didn't start out this size, they started out this size. But it only took 40 years, 50 years to get to be the giant forest around you. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. So I also really like talking to students about forestry and wildlife, since those are my two strong educational backgrounds, of explaining that we like to look at forests and think that, oh, a big old forest, that's the forest that would help all wildlife. But no, wildlife are like people. You know, you can't assume that what one person needs is what all people need. And I like to tell kids that when you look at a forest, you have to understand that just as an old forest is one kind of forest, that doesn't mean it's the best kind of forest. That would be like saying old people are better than young people. And I'll ask them, am I better than you? No, we are just different stages. And so old forest, young forest, new forest, middle-aged forest, they all have value and they all benefit wildlife in different ways. And that's something I think a lot of kids don't understand, or even adults, that forests of different age classes benefit different kinds of wildlife. And if you really want to support wild animals, then you also need to support having diverse forests. And forest management is one of the ways we can maintain diverse forest systems to support our wild animals. And I think kids kind of go like, oh yeah, I'll point out to them. Clear cuts, you may look at a clear cut and think, well, there's nothing there. But if you look carefully, there are so many insects. You have deer and elk. You have rabbits, you have all sorts of different animals that prefer that habitat. If you got rid of all that habitat, then you've gotten rid of the homes of many kind of wildlife species. So we need it all. Oh boy, yes. Delicious. Just so glad these trees are flexible.